2 cameras. That is what I fully believe changes people's hearts. It isn't going to be a powerful message. Sometimes if you guys think about it, like what has really changed your perspective, rarely it's a message. If you think about all the sermons and all that stuff, you can recall a few like zingers that were like, oh, that's a good one, right? But as far as like what actually changed you, it's something deeper. And that's what happened for me. See, I was the first Christian inside of my home. I mean, my mom and dad, like, they were Catholics, but by the Catholic Church, they're back there. And they can't say anything right now, so they have to just listen. But they were like bad Catholics. Like, by the Catholic Church, even they were like, man, you guys are not great at this thing right now, right? And so, like, there was a very low understanding of like what it meant for me to kind of follow after Jesus. I knew some of the Bible stories, I knew what that meant and stuff, right? And then I started going to wrestling practice, and my wrestling coach, he had this very slight tactic where he was like, hey, on Wednesday nights, I have youth group. If you want to go to youth group, you can go. If not, you're going to do an hour of conditioning because I can't be there. And so obviously all wrestlers were like, we're all going because we're not going to do an hour of conditioning. And so it was a brilliant tactic where you got most of the wrestling team to always go to youth group. And so that's where I heard and began to see something a little bit different about Christians. Something that was like a little bit different. And I began to make small little connections in this social gathering with people where they were at. And then it was at a large gathering. This was really popular in the 90s and early 2000s. Acquire the Fire, Dare to Share. There were these big conferences and like thousands of teens would get together and it was really loud and like, you know, it was like lots and lots of hype, right? Really powerful message, crazy like music. They bring in like all sorts of like Christian artists and stuff, right? And that's where I like heard the gospel fully told. And I began to kind of observe, oh, this is like really what the Christian gathering is really like here. And that's where I accepted Christ. But then, throughout that time, it wasn't just that one time that really transformed me, because my youth pastor, he saw this, and then he called me, and he called several of us together, and we began what he called a discipleship group. And we began to go through the head, heart, and hands of Christian living, where we not only learn theology and what it meant, you know, who Jesus was, but also like the heart, like what do Christians and why do Christians act this way? What was Jesus' heart behind some of the commands that he gave us? What should our heart be transformed into? And then he even took it a step further. We had a very close relationship with just a few of us, about 3 of us, that he'd invite over to his house pretty frequently, and we'd do like manual labor, where like, and we weren't good at it. I need to preference that because like there were several times where we cost him thousands of dollars in like tree line systems, trying to pre-puncture him with like pocket knives, throwing tent pegs at his truck and just getting a tent peg directly impaled into his truck and stuff, because he had teenagers doing this farm work, right? But it was in those moments that he showed us, hey, this is like what a devotion with your family looks like. This is what a quiet time looks like. I remember he called out several of us to teach us about what integrity was, who you are when no one is looking. And we developed a very close, intimate relationship with him in a spiritual father type of format. And all of these different areas, the very large public area, right? The smaller social gatherings of youth group, the small group gathering of a discipleship group, and then just the 3 doing life together, were all different ways and different formats of discipleship. That was a huge life-changing event for me. Now, we've talked through, if you guys can go back and see some of our previous messages on discipleship, and we've talked through in detail about the head, heart, and hands, and about the spiritual journey and different things within inside of discipleship. But what I want us to explore today is why we are intentional about the spaces and how we form discipleship inside of the spaces here at Reunion Church and the spaces inside of your life as well. Because when you look at Jesus' life, he had these different ways of having community around him and having different spaces and discipleship levels that impacted people's hearts for him. Now, most of us, if there was a need that we could say was across most of America, it was we have a need for belonging. After COVID, we constantly heard about that, how people were so lonely. And even though we've gotten a little bit better about that, continuously, the thought is like, we're having a hard time finding people that we can belong with. At different phases, at different journeys of our life, wherever we're at, it's very easy, and we've all probably said this at one point, man, I don't think anyone gets what I'm going through right now. And that's a sign of us trying to find a place to belong. And what our thoughts are sometimes is I need someone in the exact space that I'm in right now, that I've got 4 kids, that I'm this age, that we've been married this long, that we've got no kids, whatever it might be. But we're trying to find people that are exactly like us, that we can resonate with, so that we can find a place of belonging. But often, what we're lacking on is what sociologists have kind of deemed out about the 4 spaces of belonging that every person needs to have. And Jesus, being the master of disciple making, had developed discipleship in all 4 of these spaces for people to find belonging and to find relationship, to be able to get to know him in the head, heart, and hand of who he is. So the first space that I want us to kind of explore is the public space, okay? Now the public space is usually a larger space. It's usually about 70 people or so, okay? And what you kind of think about is you think about honestly large crowds, like concerts, okay? Sporting events. You belong as a fan, but not as you're not personally known by the person that you're out there for, right? You're a fan of Miley Cyrus. You're a fan of whatever it might be. And so you're a fan of the Broncos. You're not known individually in that space, but collectively we have all come together for that singular purpose. Collectively, we've come together to be a fan of that concert, of that sport, whatever it might be. It could be following on social media, following an influencer, and you're known and you find that belonging, that you are part of that group itself in that larger space. Inside a church world, that's usually what we kind of noticed with even what worship is. As we were singing here, that space of belonging is that we are a fan of God, right? We are worshiping together, and that's what we are practicing when we have worship. When we are singing to him, it's very similar when a concert and then the artist is like, hey, everyone, let's belt this out, right? And everyone's finding a space because we all know the song, you all have a passion around the song, whatever it might be. But that's essentially what is the heart behind worship itself, where we are coming together in that space and finding a place of belonging as we sing out what even the last song was singing. That we seek the Lord, that we are seeking out God's face. And that's like a public level of belonging. And when you're in the public level of belonging, discipleship happens by observation. You're sitting back and you're observing what is happening here. How are we as a group, how is this group happening? So if you come in and you go to there's a very unique artist, Sleep Token. Any of you guys familiar with, okay, yeah, some of you a little bit more weird people, my wife included, are big fans of Sleep Token, okay? And if you, if you enjoy, I don't know country singers anymore, but some country artists, and you go to a Sleep Token concert, you're gonna be like, oh, this is like a cult. I don't know what's happening here, right? Because they all dress a certain way, it's really dark, the lights are super weird, they're doing this weird music that's kind of metal, but also vampire-ish, I don't know, it's check it out, you guys see what I'm talking about, you're like, oh no, this makes sense. But collectively, as they're all singing the songs together, they're finding this space of belonging, and people are observing that, being like, ooh, I like that, or being like, no, not for me, that is not my thing, right? And same thing happens inside a sporting arena and etc. People are observing, yes, we're doing really well, we're not doing really well. We're observing collectively what is happening in that space. And so discipleship happens by that observation as we are seeing through teaching, through the model, and through celebration, that we celebrate these things together in it. Same thing with YouTubers and influencers. That is essentially what we are seeing in that discipleship. Now, these public spaces also generally, there's a literal space between people that you're a little bit more comfortable with, okay? And it's about 10 feet that you're comfortable, like, hey, I see you over there, but like, once they start getting a little bit closer, now you're getting into a different space. And if someone's like right here with you, you're pretty uncomfortable, right? Like, some of you guys have maybe been parts of like groups like that where like, or honestly sometimes in churches, and they're like, hey, hug your neighbor, and you're like, oh man, that is like right here, that's too soon, right? And it's because it's invading, like you're observing, and now all of a sudden you're asking me to get like really close with someone. And like, you know, there was one church that was like, hey, everyone, like go and ask, you know, meet someone new and ask them how you can pray for them, right? And it's, for an introvert, like their worst nightmare for someone to kind of do something like that. Yeah, 100%, please, never do that, right? And it's because, like, yeah, we're in a public, we're observing, we're okay at this space to see what's happening, but we don't want to get that close to someone to share, and that's why you won't get anything very authentic in that moment, because you're instantly jumping too many spaces where it's like, dude, I don't know you that well to share with you, hey, my grandma's dying of cancer, or hey, I'm struggling with this, like I just met you, I'm gonna share that, just pray for me that I can seek the Lord better, you know? And use a very general answer. And so you have to be aware, like that's the space that you're in. You're not going to have deep, authentic relationships like that. And that's one of the things we have to be aware of with social media. Social media is a public space, okay? Everyone can see what you're commenting. Everyone can see what you're liking. Everyone can see how you're responding. And so whatever you post on social media, just be prepared. You're not going to get real, authentic conversation. That's why everyone's so like upset, like very like aggressive right up front. Because that's an instant first barrier you can throw on. Or sarcasm, it's an instant first barrier to keep you from getting to the next closer areas of relationship. And that's what we have to try to watch for, is that we can't let those social levels of belonging or those public levels of belonging in social media jump spaces like that. Now, obviously, Jesus had done this several times. In John chapter 6, verses 1 through 2, Jesus, after this, he went out to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, in the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. So again, Jesus taught to the crowds, and the crowds were following to observe what was Jesus doing. Okay? Mark 6:34. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, for they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. So Jesus sees what is happening. Jesus observes from here, and he wants to get closer to the people. But because it's a mass crowd, he won't be able to teach on that truly intimate, personal level with them. And so that's why you get these like broader stories that relate to most people of what they were going through in that season. But then you have this social spacing, okay? And this is a little bit smaller. This is like 20 to like 50 people or so, okay? And this is the area that honestly most of us don't like, because this is like small talk. And most people, man, I hate small talk. But small talk is very important for us, because this is that space where you begin to get comfortable with someone. You begin to test out different levels of authenticity and even vulnerability with someone at this point here. And think of it as the people that you would invite to a barbecue. You get to know some names, you get to know some stories, and there's a comfort there without getting too vulnerable too quickly. And this social level of belonging happens inside of like spin classes or even in gyms. This last Saturday, a bunch of us went over to Alex's place here, and like there was like 20 to 30 strongmen there, right? And we're hearing a little bit of their stories, hearing what's happening, you know, telling each other good job and smacking each other on the butt, and like we're all sweaty and dripping sweat everywhere and stuff, and there's hair all over the stones. So much hair on the stones.
So tacky.
It's so gross. Partially my hair. Mostly my hair. And Josh's. See, and so that was like a very, some of you are like, that's like an intimate level of belonging right there. But it's, for strongman, it's a social level of belonging still. And and we're sharing stories. We're hearing about mostly about lifting stories and how much you can max, and everyone's adding about an extra Eddie did a 270-pound stone, and he's saying it's 300 pounds, and everyone's adding little points on this, right? But it's your neighborhood block party, and it's where you begin to test out, are these people I can trust? It's a mid-sized group where you begin to share some basic thoughts and some basic stories about your life with other people. And you find the people that you can trust. You can find the people you can get along with. You can find the people that you're probably not going to get too much deeper with that person. And that's okay. Not everyone's going to get all the way through, because it's almost like a funnel. At a public level of belonging, huge. You probably won't know most people's names, and then it gets a little bit smaller into social level belonging, and then it will get even smaller. Luke chapter 10, verses 1 through 2. After this, Jesus, the Lord, appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. And he said to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly of the Lord of the harvest field to send the laborers into the harvest. Matthew 9 through 13. Jesus passed on from there, and he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, follow me. And he rose and he followed him. And Jesus reclined at the table of his house, and behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples and teachers. The teacher ate with the tax collectors and the sinners. But when they had heard it, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners. Luke 19, 1 through 10. And he entered Jericho, and he was passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector and was rich. And he was seeking to see Jesus, who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not. And because he was small in stature, so he ran on ahead and climbed into the sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to that place, he looked and he said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come on down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came and received him with joy, and they saw and they all grumbled that he had gone down to be a guest of this man who was a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone or anything, I restore it in fourfolds. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. So you can see Jesus gathered this larger group. He had his 72 disciples that were with him. And often, Jesus, this social belonging is actually happening inside of houses around food. Now, those of you who have been with us for a little bit, we talk a lot about the importance of just having a meal together. Because when you have a meal together, people talk, people share. When we first started as a church, one of the things that we tried to do is we had dinner, because we would meet Saturday nights, and we would have dinner before. People would eat, talk, and then we'd gather together and do the rest of the service, right? And it was great. It's a little bit harder on a Sunday morning. It's like, hey, everyone, let's have breakfast together. Let's do all this, right? And it's a little bit more difficult. But that's why it's still important for us, where after church service, we still gather, we have a meal together, we have those conversations. A lot of what we do as a church, we gather around tables and we have a meal together. Because that's this place where we begin to have those type of conversations with each other, where we begin to understand and trust the level of belonging of where people might be at. Now, as a church, when you look at our size and where we're at, we're still in this social level of belonging. And so we kind of combine the two. We have a smaller public level of belonging where we have worship and we have a larger message. But then immediately what we do is we do these table talks where we gather around the table and we talk and we share things at that table. And at first it's usually a little bit more shallow and it's a little bit more of just basic head answers that we kind of give to each other and thoughts. And that's perfectly fine because we're testing and seeing where each other are kind of at. And you hear different perspectives, different stories, etc., which is great. But some of you guys have been sitting together at the same table and you know each other really well, and you start challenging each other a little bit. because you've built that trust, you've built that vulnerability with each other where you can share those things with one another. And you can share the things that you need prayer with. You can share the struggles. You can share the doubt that you have. This social level of belonging and the personal level of belonging, I think, are the two biggest areas, the next area down, that we as a church have the greatest opportunity to meet for people. And that we need to meet, because I think those are the areas that we lack the most in society. The personal space is that 4 to 12 people. And you're usually within about arm's length from each other. And you're okay sitting really close to each other in this personal level of belonging. It's where trust is grown. You know the names, you know the stories, you feel safe enough to be honest about what's going on. But not necessarily to the deepest level where you share your deepest struggles, though with maybe a few in that group you might, but with a larger group, you don't feel quite that secure yet. And that's okay. But most of us even struggle just to be having enough honesty and letting down the guards that we'll have up front. We have a persona, we have a way that we've said this is how the world's going to view me, and it might not be your authentic self yet. And that's what that personal level of belonging and finding people that you can share with this. This is where the church over the last 80 years has really pushed for small groups and small group Bible studies. And the idea was that you'd have that group and you could get closer and you could share some of those things. Now, some of you who grew up in church usually have some horror stories of how small groups have kind of gone, because you'll meet together and someone says something way off, or someone tries to get too close and it's super awkward and they're sharing some things. You're like, oh, that's therapy. That's not this. We need therapy right here for this right now, right? Or people just never get comfortable enough, because there is a trust and a vulnerability. And when people come in and out of groups, when people leave groups all the time, or you start a group and you only started for about 3 months and you abandon the group later on, you can't build those type of relationships with each other. You can't build this level of belonging to trust with these people, to be honest. To be like, yeah, me and the wife, we got in a fight today. It was over something stupid and I realized that. But that's this level of personal belonging. We have a close circle of friends that you usually you're happy to share a meal together. You're happy, just hey man, come over, whatever we have in the fridge we'll make. You're not gonna go out and you're not gonna buy something super nice for them, because it's I know these guys. Those are immediately it's the Tuesday group guys, you guys know what I'm talking about. We're buying Del Taco, and I'm not buying something nice for these guys. It's that group team project at work where maybe you guys have gotten together quite a bit and have kind of done some of these things, and you create a close group network where you guys are gathering together. This is obviously Jesus' 12 disciples, right? Jesus went out and he washed the 12 disciples' feet, and he set the example for them of hey, as I have done, now you should do. In Matthew 8, 23 through 27, with during the storm, and Jesus calms the storm, the disciples were there and observing that and were with him in it. In Mark 8, verse 27, as the disciples were gathering, Jesus asked the disciples, hey, who do you guys say I am? And he's asking these guys deeper questions. He's asking these guys really, who do you believe that I am? Do you understand what you're even asking at this point here? See, discipleship in the public level happens by observation. We observe what people are doing. But discipleship at the social level, discipleship happens by participation. Socially, you're participating in a meal. Socially, you're beginning to do a project together. Socially, you're serving, whatever that might be. But discipleship in the personal space, discipleship happens by application. Discipleship happens as you're tested to truly love this person. They say something that hurts you. They say something that really bothers you. And now you have to really love God's people. Now you have to really apply grace. Now you have to really apply when you screw up and asking for grace and bringing humility into this moment. We learn by doing life together at this phase, where there's a closeness, there's support, and you challenge each other. You know each other, you know each other's families, you have each other's support, you know you can send out a text if you need something, and you can challenge each other. Like, hey man, that's probably the wrong way to do things. Hey, I saw how you responded. That was stupid. And you're okay. You have that type of relationship to have with these people here. This is where questions get asked and answered from each other by having conversations and authentic dialogue. This is what we've known for our true discipleship groups itself. Socially, in the social level of belonging, we have our table talks, and you get some personal level of belonging, but then we have our discipleship groups throughout the week, and this is really what our heart is, where you find that closeness, and you begin to see that application, and we challenge each other, and we push each other to really know, to be authentic. You'll see the very last one then is transparent. And this should be a very small group of people. Very, very close group of people, probably within inside of your personal group of people that you can be very transparent with. That you can let people know your deepest, darkest secrets. You can let people know exactly, this is exactly what I am struggling. That at 2 a.m. if they called, you know they need something, and you're going to answer. You know if you reach out to these people and you need them to cover for you, you need them to do something, they're there for you in this. You know that they're also going to be the ones who see directly through you. And they're like, dude, don't give me that answer. I know you're full of it at that moment. And they call you out on it. Most of you are probably thinking about your spouse. And that's, your spouse should definitely be in that level, all right? If your spouse isn't, that's another issue. But your spouse should be right in that level. And there should be a few others that you can share with as well, where they will call you out. And you might get upset with them for the first little bit. You might be really upset that they would call you out at it, but at the end of the day, the relationship isn't broken. At the end of the day, you know they have the best intention. And you come together still with them. In this, Jesus had his three. He had John, he had Peter, and he had James. And those three, you think about the transfiguration, where Jesus brought them with him, specifically to be part of this very unique moment. You have the sons of Zebedee, you have John and James going to Jesus being, hey Jesus, we want to be sitting at the right-hand side. And she's like, hey, you don't get what you're asking here for. Like, are you ready for this? And Jesus really challenges them on it. And then the other disciples are like, hey guys, what the heck? That was pretty messed up for you to ask. And they have that deeper relationship. You have Jesus calling out Peter. Discipleship here happens by deep transformation that occurs by confession. You're okay with sharing and confessing. I screwed up. You're okay with sharing where you need help, where you are weak. And you wouldn't want everyone who's in the social level to know these things about you. You wouldn't want everyone you definitely don't want anyone in the public level to know those things about you, right? And that's okay. They shouldn't. This is how belonging, this is how closeness, this is how discipleship is set up in the spaces and the relationships that we have. This is where the idea of accountability partners came about. If those of you who were part of church world, and it was like, hey, confess all your deepest, darkest secrets. But it was jumping basically from accountability groups. You jump from here directly to there, and people would miss the social level of belonging. They would completely skip it. Small groups generally try to go from here, and you go directly to here. And sometimes even from here, where it's like you just join randomly a small group, and instantly they're asking you to join this. My wife and I were part of like a few church plant organizations trying to help out and being a part of those things. They have great intentions. They try to help us out too, right? And like early on they were great. But almost every one of these retreats, we're there with like a bunch of pastors, public level belonging. We don't know these people even remotely. We're all there for a common purpose, like we're church planting, great. And immediately, tell us your deepest, darkest secrets. And I'm like, dude, no. It's not happening. Like, I'm not sharing my deepest, darkest secrets from some guy to some guy in Louisiana that I don't know. Like, I can't understand his accent half the time. So I'm not going to share those type of things. I don't know him even remotely. However, David and I, like, we went through these levels, like, for years. Because we got saved together, we went to church together, we were in that discipleship group with my mentor together, right? And our relationship is always here. Where I can share with him, like, dude, I'm frustrated with this. And he knows sometimes where he's like, all right, I know you're not actually, like, truly meaning these things, and he just lets me vent. Other times, he'll be like, you're an idiot. And you need to chill. My wife, obviously, is fantastic at doing that all the time. And when I don't like what my wife says, I'll go to David, who usually does what my wife has said already. And that's the transparency. Like, they know me well enough to be like, no, that's stupid. That's not a great idea. Or like, you should be doing that. Why are you not doing that? And the exhortation aspect of it. All of these spaces will point you to the divine space of just you and God. It's just you and Jesus. Now, most Christians, we kind of dwell, honestly, in church. We think, hey, we live in this public space. I'll go to church. I'll listen to a great message. I'll clap my hands, right? I'll say amen to the pastor because he asked me to. And then it's just me and Jesus. I'll just listen to what God has to say. You are missing so many deep levels of discipleship and the growth of what God has for you. It's not just you and Jesus. It's you, Jesus, and the church. It's you, Jesus, and the people he's put you around. He has put us as relationships, the relationships that we have in the season that we are in. There's a desperate need where we need to have time of solitude, of prayer, of silence with just Jesus, and spending our own time with him. Of just abiding in who Christ is. As Jesus set that perfect example for us multiple times, where Jesus would get up in the morning and he'd just spend time with the Father. And so we need that. So we need that divine alone time with God. You can't rely on everyone else all the time. People will fail you. They're not perfect. They're going to mess up. You need that time. But equally, you need all those levels of relationships. And if we're honest, most Americans, we have public levels of belonging. We go to concerts, we go to events, we have some of these things. We'll go to work events and we'll have small talk and we hate them, right? Of like, oh yeah, tell me about your quota numbers, how'd it go, man? Oh, that's great, just another day in the life, right? And like, you hate that so much, right? And then you have maybe one or two people in a transparent relationship. Hopefully you're transparent with your wife. Hopefully you have a good friend that you can do this with, right? But when we're talking about belonging, we, as Americans, for the most part, are desperately missing those two middle levels of a social level of belonging and actually building trust and allowing ourselves to begin to be vulnerable with someone. And that personal level of belonging, where we can actually be authentic with someone, to let them know what we're seeing, to begin to be transparent with what we're having, to be vulnerable enough to share some of the things, and sitting back in that tension and be like, all right, can I trust people with this? Can I trust this group of men? Can I trust this group of women with this information I just shared? People sometimes struggle, like, well, how do I know what to share into which group? Well, what we've been taught and what I have kind of seen is that you want to be authentic with everyone. In the social level and public level of belonging, you want to be authentic with everyone. Be your authentic self, right? Who are you? But then, in the personal level of belonging, and as you're trying to find people in the social level to push into the personal level of belonging, you want to be vulnerable with just a few. You begin to be vulnerable. You begin to share some of those darker things with them. But then you can only be transparent with the trusted. You can only be transparent with a very select few trusted that have proven themselves in that in your life. And some people, they won't remain in that spot. They might break it and they might have to go back up into other levels of belonging. Some people don't share the same beliefs as you, as friends, and they might be, in a completely different area. So they give you terrible advice and they need to move into different areas of belonging for you. But my suspicion is that for most of us, we need to start transitioning our hearts and allowing our hearts to be more vulnerable with other people and trusting people so that we have that personal level of belonging and we can have more people than just our spouse in that transparent relationship. Because I love my wife. I absolutely love her. But sometimes I need a guy's brain to give an answer to something. Like I need a guy's thought on it. And she's told me that sometimes. She's like, I do not relate with what you're saying at all. And that's okay. Vice versa, my wife and I will be intent and I will be listening, trying not to fix anything in that moment. And she'll share it, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say in this moment for sure, but I'll share this, and it was wrong. And I'm like, you need to find a woman to talk to, like, because I can't answer it. But that's the way relationships work. And this is God's like strategy and how he's kind of wired us and has put us together as social beings that we should have these relationships. And the church has the greatest example where we can help fulfill these things. Think about the workplaces, think about the other groups that you have, and it is tough to have those relationships with other people. Because everyone is scared. Social media, and Chris has kind of put this as a good phrase, where like social media has made you your own public relationship manager, and you are so afraid of how other people review you, will see you, that you will put up a barrier over and over and over again, and that most people will never have deep relationships. That you won't trust people enough. And you don't know how to do that inside of work. You don't have other community groups that you can kind of do that in. I mean, Reunion's own phrase is like, man, we're like, it's a community of friends. Like we're all built around this together. Like it's a trusted community. And it's a nice saying. But those of you who lived in the area, what has Reunion actually done to really build a community? Nothing. Yeah, it doesn't have anything. They don't know how to do it. But the church does. Because Jesus gave us the example. He's wired it in our hearts as the Holy Spirit works and transforms in each and every one of us. He does that and changes us to where we have that heart desire and we can be there for each other and we can have that vulnerability to share and be with someone. In the church, I've been so honored to kind of see us moving through these relationships. Where even, many of you know Julie in our church here, okay? And her daughter is not going to make it, all right? Okay, full transparency. Like unless God does a miracle right now, and he has done many miracles, her daughter's not going to make it. And we need God to do a miracle. But what Julie needs is she needs the church. She needs us here for her. And what's been amazing is seeing many of you guys moving into those barriers. Where it's like, man, there's a need. This woman is hurting. She is going to lose her daughter. She has no one around her. We're going to go visit her and just sit with her in the hospital. We're going to go there and just visit and be there with her. And so many of you have done that. Which I am so proud of you guys for doing that. To be there for people like that. Because for most, people will sit back and be like, that's not my job. I don't know her well enough. I'm not going to do that. But many of you have seen the need. You've known her just a little bit, and you're okay to move into that personal belonging and sit with her in the muck. To sit with her in the shit of it all, about to lose her daughter, and to love her. Listen to her vent and say things that you know aren't true, that you know she probably doesn't really mean in this moment. And that's okay. We're going to be with her in this moment. That's what the church is about. I don't know any other organization. I don't know any other group. I know for a fact a workplace will not do that. And so as people are crying out for, man, we need belonging, man, we need help, we need community, you are the answers for that. You bring that. You bring that with the hope that you have and the way the Holy Spirit has transformed you. And that's why we started Reunion Church, to build out that. We're not going to be a mega church. We're not going to be, like, unless God does something crazy, like, we're not going to see any crazy growth numbers on that. We're not going to count all baptisms and all the salvations. But we are going to count on how people are loved. We're going to tell the stories like crazy of how people love each other. Because that's the mark of a Christian, the way that you love. As we're going through 1 John, that's all we're talking about. That's all we're sharing. What does John say? He's like, man, you want to know you're a Christian? You want to know you're saved? Do you actually love people? Do you actually care for people? Not just like, they're nice and like they're around, but like, man, when something is hard going on, but like integrity, who you are when no one is looking. It's Friday night, there's the football game, and some of us got the call about Julie's daughter. And they went out and had integrity and showed who they really were in Christ and visited and hung out with her, to be there with her. Like, that's the mark of a Christian. That's what causes the world to be like, yeah, there's something actually decent here. There's something actually hopeful here. And we can bring that. But you have to be open to allowing yourself to be in those spaces, to be vulnerable, to be transparent, to build those relationships, and to give the time. If you are so busy with the world, with everything else, and you're constantly going, you're not going to have time for relationships, and you're just going to view people as things to be used. So you have to slow down. You have to make yourself available. You have to make sacrifices to be there, to make time for the relationships. This all also takes time to go through. We've probably had people in our lives that have kind of done that where, like, you know, you're just getting to know them and all of a sudden they jump and go move into really dark things. They're like really hard things. You're like, whoa, where did this? It's because people so desperately want someone they can trust and to be with. But a healthy relationship, it'll take time. It'll take time to go through those phases of discipleship. To let God mature and work and like to build that trust and vulnerability. And we have to be patient with those relationships. There's so much more. You guys know that, like, man, as soon as we start talking about discipleship, I just can go on. You guys can be stuck in your seats forever. But I'm going to close this in prayer. We'll have table talks. We have questions already kind of laid out at the tables with leaders that can help guide the conversation. Talk about these levels of belonging. Talk about discipleship opportunities you guys have seen and observed in those spots. So God, we pray for this time. I thank you for what you've been doing here, for the way that you've been molding and working in the relationships, Jesus. God, I pray if there's areas in our lives where we are lacking, and it's a fear that we have of trusting someone in that you would help us to open up, that you would help us to allow room, to allow margin, to allow space for these relationships because they're important for us. That the way we see growth and maturity in ourselves, to becoming more like you, God, is through the time and the space that we give to others. Lord, we pray this in your name. Amen. Amen.